Okay, next month in December, there's the meeting of a lot of nations. I think it's over 100 nations are meeting in Marrakech, in Morocco, and they're going to agree on this United Nations Migration Compact. Now, already a lot of nations are backtracking. We've just seen Salvini, he's pulled out Italy. Trump has pulled out America. Switzerland, the most sensible of all nations and probably the most successful, they don't want to be part of this migration pact. But Britain will be there and we'll be going along with it. Theresa May, following her surrender to Brussels bureaucrats, is now about to surrender to the United Nations. This is how much of a globalist she is. And this pact is being portrayed as a format to allow migration to take place in a very smooth way in which the migrants are protected and respected and they're not subject to these gangs that take them across the borders, you know. So it's presented in a very positive way. And it's about asylum, people, refugees, people who are fleeing from wars and conflict. It's about protecting them. It's about giving them an opportunity to rebuild their lives. And it's all presented in this nice, comfy, cuddly language. But there's an underlying reality of it all. It's actually making the world borderless. It's actually creating vast opportunities for migrants to flood from the third world into Europe and North America. This is the goal of the United Nations. They want to overwhelm the first world with the third world migrants. And what they're doing, they're going to create legal structures where people who are migrating across borders, simply illegally, they're going to be given the right to claim asylum or to have their cases heard in courts, the right to reside in these countries they've crossed into while their legal position is being sort of agreed upon. It's a green light to everybody who wants to come to the West, to jump onto the welfare bandwagon, to go and live in our cities and basically overwhelm our cities, colonize our cities. It's a green light for them to come into the West. And this is hidden, you see. It's hidden behind sort of fancy jargon. But the people in the third world know this, and the people traffickers, they know this. And it will lead to another huge influx of immigrants into Europe, like we saw with the previous one into Germany, the vast tidal wave that came up from Turkey, supposedly of Syrian refugees, but it was actually a mixture of all sorts. And Theresa May is going to go along with this. She is willing to sign away our borders, our sovereignty, our economy to these international globalist institutions. She has faith in them because she believes in them. She believes this is the future of one world government. And she's not. The problem is she's not taking the British people along with her. She's not actually being honest with them. We're being deceived at every point. We're being manipulated to think that we're being part of something which is actually to our advantage. And if we don't take part in it, we'll suffer. This is the whole message that we get with the surrender to the Brussels bureaucrats. Project Fear. Unless you go along with their structures and their agenda and their visions, you will suffer as a nation. The economy will suffer. It's just a total nonsense. This path that we're being led along is a path of destruction. It's the path which they glorify. They say we want a diverse society. Theresa May has said diversity leads to better decision making. Diversity creates more opportunities. It's an illusion. Diversity equals destruction. All the certainties, all the successes that we've had from our past, and we are a very successful nation, probably one of the most successful nations of all time, they will be pushed aside. And these new agendas and new perspectives are going to be brought in, and new interests. Whose interest is it for Britain to become a multicultural province of a global empire? Is that in our interest? We lose our sovereignty. We will lose our democracy, our ability to call our leaders to account. This is what a lot of it's about. The elite do not want the people to call them to account. They want to push the people to one side and make the decisions that they want in their interest and the interest of the ruling strata. This is a terrifying prospect. It's really, globalism has become a form of dictatorship. It's the state against the people, and we have to wake up to that. Now, people are fighting back against this. Political forces are emerging to challenge this whole agenda that these people are pushing. You're not going to hear it in the mainstream media because the mainstream media are being paid for. They are owned by the globalists. Every time you switch on the BBC, every time you switch on Sky News, every time you pick up a national newspaper, you're just absorbing globalist propaganda. If you want my advice, switch them off. Have nothing to do with them because they're just manipulating you. They won't even give you the information you need. Thankfully, we have the social media and we can hear realistic voices and get reality. This is the point. We're being fed an unreality. These people are presenting something to us which is not real. And we know that. We can see what's happening in our cities and we can see what's happening in our countries. Every nation now in Europe is stacking up these huge national debts. Britain especially. And a lot of this national debt is to finance the immigrants that have come into this country, to finance their healthcare, to finance their education, to finance their welfare benefits, to finance their housing. Rather than passing it on as a tax burden to the indigenous population, which the governments know will be incredibly unpopular, they're simply borrowing money, and the borrowings are stacking up. Britain is trillions of pounds in debt. Now, that's all hidden because interest rates are low. But as inflation builds up in a system, interest rates are going to have to go back up again. And the cost of financing this debt is going to cripple us. We've had a period of economic expansion, a limited period, since the credit crunch, but that's now coming to an end. And as the economic reality begins to dawn, there's going to have to be some really harsh decisions, real austerity. And that could hit the British people hard. We'll have to face the reality that is actually out there rather than hide behind this mountain of debt. Now, in the United States, Donald Trump has cut dramatically corporation tax and he's cut dramatically taxes on the middle class. And that's meant that global capital is now moving towards America. It's pulling out of Europe, it's pulling out of the Far East, and it's going to reinvest in America. Is American first strategy will work and it will enrich and empower America again, but it will drain resources from Britain, it will drain resources from Europe. And Donald Trump has said often that America has subsidised the European economy through a huge budget deficit for decades, and it's subsidised European military through NATO because of the American military presence, which cost a fortune, which the Europeans haven't had to pay for. Donald Trump has now pulled the plug on these two things. He's now said that America is no longer going to subsidise the European economy and is no longer prepared to subsidise the European military. So again, we're going to have another huge financial burden imposed upon us. We're going to hit a financial crunch in the near future, and we're not in a strong position because of the scale of debt in places like France and Italy as well. That's going to hit us hard, and the reality of what's been happening over the past decades will come home to roost. We are a weak society. We've allowed people to come into this country and come into the nations of Europe in their millions as parasites to suck our national wealth, to just devour what is ours. And we've pretended it's not happening, but it is happening, and the consequence of that will hit home. So I see a crunch ahead. I see a crunch, a political crunch. I see another financial crunch, a credit crunch. I see a political crunch. There's going to have to be some real decisions about what sort of societies we're going to live in. Now, because if we stay subservient to the European structures, we will not have the freedom to make the decisions we need to make. This is the point. This is why we need to leave the European Union, because we need to regain our freedom. This is why we need to push aside the United Nations, because the United Nations is now pushing for a borderless world. We can't go along with these two strategies. It's our annihilation that is in prospect. So the British people, if we want a future, we have to make decisions now. We have to support new political forces. Within the Conservative Party, there are different factions fighting for control. We need a patriotic faction to win. I have no faith in the left of the Tory party. I have no faith at all in the Labour Party. I have no faith in the Liberal Democrats. I hope these smaller parties bubbling up can gain strength, especially UKIP. But there needs to be a realignment in British policy, in British politics, where those political forces which do put Britain first finally have a voice. I hope you've enjoyed this channel. There's a subscription button. Hit the subscription button. The many subscribers we have as possible, the better. There's also a donation button. If you'd like to make a contribution to this channel, there's a PayPal link in the description. We're hoping to buy new cameras. We're hoping to buy a camera which will enable us to film on the rally. We need constantly, equipment has to be renewed, and we have to pay travel costs to go to these places. The better the equipment we have, the more videos we can make, the easier we can make them. So if you can afford to make any donation at all, I would very much appreciate it.